Welcome to Speak English Podcast with Rory and Alex.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you're learning another language, and especially if it's English, we know what you're up against. It's almost never the grammar rules, right? Or the flashcards. It's that invisible wall of anxiety, that fear of making a mistake in front of everyone. So today, we've gone deep into a really specific stack of sources for you. We've got academic research on what's called L2 willingness to communicate, or WTC, and we've combined that with some super practical grammar guides and social science hacks. Our mission here is to pull all of this together into a clear, actionable blueprint. We're not just summarizing, we are trying to hack the English confidence gap. We're going straight for the psychological jugular of self-doubt.
And that psychological focus is absolutely critical. The foundational thesis we pulled from all these different sources is, well, it's powerful. Fluency isn't just about how many hours you study. It's driven by this precise convergence of your language mechanics, the grammar, the words, and most importantly, your self-belief. It's the inner game. It's how you see your own ability. That's what really unlocks everything else.
Okay, let's unpack that then, starting right there, with that wall that just stops conversation cold. Language learning anxiety. This isn't just, being shy. It's a real recognized barrier. What is actually going on in our minds when we just freeze?
It is, like you said, a genuine psychological condition. This anxiety, it comes from the feeling that your core ability to just express who you are is, well, it's under threat. You're taking a social risk. And the fear of being misunderstood or, even worse, being ridiculed, it feels incredibly real. The mind just sees it as a threat.
And for so many people learning English, the stakes they're just astronomical. It's not a hobby.
Exactly. For a lot of ESL students, English proficiency is this high-stakes gatekeeper. It's the absolute requirement for a promotion, for getting into a university, for passing those big tests like TOEFL or the GRE. So that pressure cooker environment, it just ramps up the anxiety and leads to some really predictable reactions.
What does that anxious response actually look like, in a classroom or at work?
Well, our sources point to three main ways it shows up. First, there's freezing.
Okay.
That classic, my mind just went blank moment when someone asks you a question. Second is avoidance. So missing class, sitting way in the back, turning down invitations where you'll have to speak English.
Yeah.
And the third one is a bit surprising. It's overcompensating, spending just an excessive amount of time preparing way more than is needed because you're terrified of an unexpected question.
That makes so much sense. The prep becomes a kind of shield against being vulnerable. So here's where it gets really interesting for me. How do we build an internal engine that's strong enough to just push through that paralysis? How does mindset beat this fear?
We can turn right to the framework from Carol Dweck, the growth language mindset, or GLM. And this isn't just, some generic positive thinking. It's this data-driven belief that your language abilities are not fixed traits. You're not born bad at English. There's skills that you can develop through effort, through better strategies, and just persistence.
So, okay, I believe I can improve, but how does that actually get me to speak more often? What's the connection?
That is the crucial link the research makes. It shows that GLM is a positive predictor of that willingness to communicate, the WTC. But the real engine driving it all is something called language learning self-efficacy, or LLSE. And what that means specifically is your confidence in your own ability to get the communicative task done effectively.
I see.
It's not enough to believe that people in general can learn a language.
Yeah.
You have to believe that you, right now, can have this conversation even if it's not perfect. The two beliefs that form the bridge are you can always change your L2 ability and the idea that no matter who you are, you can significantly change your language intelligence level.
So we're really targeting that LLSE, that feeling of being competent enough to just try. Okay, so for someone who needs fast results, how do we shift from that spiral of fear to just taking action?
We have to actively take apart the biggest internal roadblock, which is perfectionism. In this context, we're defining perfectionism as the constant fear of making mistakes. And that fear leads to hesitation, to overanalyzing everything in your head, and it kills progress. Fluency is about being understood, not about being flawless. The mantra has to be progress over perfection.
Right. The second you demand zero mistakes, you pretty much guarantee zero conversation. But letting go of that is terrifying for some people. So what are the actual steps? You mentioned a mistakes journal. Wouldn't focusing on mistakes just make someone who's already anxious even more anxious?
That is a fantastic question, and it's all in the framing. You're right. If you see it as a record of your failures, it will absolutely heighten anxiety. The journal shouldn't be a record of shame. It has to be a record of data. It turns that emotional embarrassment into quantifiable feedback. By writing down an error, say you keep mixing up two tenses, you stop thinking, I'm bad at English, and you start thinking, I have a systematic issue with X, and now I can fix it. It shifts your focus from your identity to your strategy.
I love that. Turning a threat into a solvable problem. Okay, what's the second mindset strategy?
It's about building identity-based habits. Long-term change almost never comes from focusing only on the result, like getting a good test score. It comes from building an identity that just naturally produces those results. The sources are really clear. You have to shift your focus to the process.
So instead of obsessing over being fluent...
Exactly. Focus on the process goal, like, I am the kind of person who practices speaking for 10 minutes, 5 days a week. You perform these small, repeated actions, and you slowly start to see yourself as a speaker, as a doer. Your actions begin to redefine how you see yourself.
You're becoming the person who already has the result. And for a quick, in-the-moment recalibration.
Daily affirmations. They're a simple but really powerful mental exercise. Just positive, personal statements like, I can learn from my mistakes, or I'm doing my best right now. They're tools to change your mood, relieve stress, and actively boost that self-efficacy. It's like strength training for your confidence.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've set up the psychological game. That dictates whether we even start talking. Now let's pivot and build the competence we need to keep that conversation going. We're switching gears to the nuts and bolts. Our sources flagged tons of grammar errors, but we're focusing on the 4 with the highest impact, the ones that cause the most confusion.
Right, and we're assuming you know the basics, so we're looking at the more subtle traps here. Number 1, and this is still cited as maybe the biggest marker of a non-native speaker, is subject-verb agreement.
Wait, really? Isn't that basic? Just adding an S to the verb?
It is basic, but the traps are insidious. The mistake almost always happens when the subject isn't right next to the verb, or when the subject is an indefinite pronoun, which we use all the time in conversation. For instance, a lot of learners will forget that pronouns like everyone are singular, so you have to say everyone is going, not everyone are going. If you can nail SVA, you instantly sound much more proficient.
That's a perfect example of a high-impact error hiding in plain sight. What's trap number 2?
Wrong word order for questions. This is really common for speakers whose first language doesn't use inversion. English is very rigid here. The structure is question word plus auxiliary verb plus subject plus the main verb. The classic mistake is leaving out that auxiliary verb. So instead of saying, when you arrive, you have to force yourself to use the auxiliary. When did you arrive? Mastering that structure makes your question so much clearer.
Okay, and the third one, those tiny, infuriating words, articles, a and the, it feels impossible.
The key is to really get the difference between definite and indefinite. Think of the as the word you use when you and the listener can both picture the exact same object. So I say, I'm going to the park, we both know which one. But the high-impact trap is with abstract nouns. When you talk about general concepts like health or education or happiness, you usually drop the article. You don't say the education is important. You just say education is important.
Right, recognizing when the noun is a general concept. And finally, let's nail down which versus that. This one can change the whole meaning of a sentence.
It's all about clarity. You use that for essential information, the information that defines what you're talking about. You use which. For non-essential, extra details, stuff you could remove, and the sentence would still have the same core meaning. Here's a quick test. If the clause needs commas around it, you almost always use which. If it's vital to the meaning, use that. Simple as that.
Perfect. Okay, we have the psychology, we have the mechanics. Now for the fun part. Captivating communication. This is where we go from being correct to being, compelling. We have 2 key areas here, high-impact language and nonverbal hacks. Let's start with one amazing word, get.
The verb get is an absolute powerhouse for intermediate learners. It's not just grammar, it's a functional shortcut. We use it constantly in English to mean become, like get tired, or to mean receive, like get a package. But its real power is in all the phrasal verbs that define our social lives.
Can you give us a few examples of how mastering get just boosts fluency right away?
Sure. If you want to talk about meeting up with friends, you don't need a fancy word, you just get together. If you have a friendly relationship, you get along. To talk about recovering from an illness or a breakup, you get over it. You can even use that complex structure, get something done, which means you paid for a service. Mastering this one verb adds so much flexibility to your speech.
And now for the social hacks. The body language secrets that build confidence, even if you're, pausing to find the right word, because if you look confident, people treat you like you are.
Precisely. First impressions are made in seconds. To build that trust instantly, use what our sources call the triple threat. First, your bliss hands. Keep your posture open. Don't hide them in your pockets. Second, your posture. Walk a little slower, shoulders back, like you own the space.
Yeah.
And third, steady, calm eye contact. Those three things together signal stability and honesty.
Okay, I'm trying to do that right now.
And this next finding is fascinating. The genuine smile. We saw a survey that said 86.9% of people can spot a fake smile. So when you meet someone new, don't just flash a big immediate grin. Let it grow slowly. Let the corners of your mouth rise gradually. It makes your positive reaction feel personal and genuine, not automatic, and it instantly disarms people.
That statistic is incredible. We really can't hide it. And that brings me to that moment of high anxiety starting a conversation. How do we hack small talk to make it less threatening?
Two proven strategies. First, use the Franklin effect. This is a social principle that says you build rapport not by offering favors, but by asking for small ones. Just showing that tiny bit of vulnerability. Could you hold this for a second, or what's your take on this? It makes you seem more human, and they become invested in helping you.
Mm-hmm.
Second, level up your small talk. Ditch that boring, frankly intimidating question, what do you do?
Yeah, I hate that question.
It just boxes people in. Instead, ask something open-ended. How do you spend most of your time? This invites them to talk about their passions, their hobbies, anything. And it opens a much deeper conversational door.
That is so much better. And what about when you're on the listening side of things? How do you show you're engaged without just grunting?
You use empathizers? So many non-native speakers fall back on monosyllabic grunts like uh-huh or and they work, but they can sound a bit disengaged. Instead, replace those with full sentences that show you're actually processing what they're saying. Instead of just, try saying, that sounds really challenging, or I can see why you did that. You're affirming their experience, which deepens the connection like nothing else.
So this whole deep dive has been about replacing that instinct for avoidance with actual competence. As we wrap this up, what is the final practical action strategy we can use today to lock all this in?
Two things, starting right now. First, take a daily bold action. Our sources suggest trying just one task from something like a 21-day confidence challenge. Start small, but be intentional. Maybe it's speak slower than usual, because slow speech projects confidence. Or maybe it's ask directly for what you want in a very low-stakes situation. These small pushes build self-trust.
Okay, a daily push. What's the second one?
Intentionally find low-stakes practice. You need a supportive, non-judgmental space to try things out. You can even apply a teaching strategy to yourself, like TPRS. Look for content that is repetitive, interesting, comprehensible, and uses high-frequency words. Practice with a friend you trust or find a conversation class where the anxiety filter is deliberately kept low.
And that really has been the core takeaway here, the true shortcut to fluency. It's not in a textbook. It's that combination of mastering the high-impact rules so you don't get stuck and deliberately building your internal confidence, that language learning self-efficacy, so you have the courage to start.
And just remember, we're all a mixture of mindsets. When you face a challenge, that defensive fixed mindset can pop up and whisper, see, you're not good at this.
Yeah.
Critical thinking just means you have to question that automatic negative response.
Yeah, that fixed mindset persona is often our worst enemy. So for a final provocative thought for you to take away, a really powerful psychological trick is to observe when you feel defensive, when that inner critic shows up, and then give your fixed mindset persona a name. That way you can talk to it instead of letting it run the show. So what will you name your internal critic, and what will you say to it the next time it appears?
With that challenge, we leave you with this powerful truth. You can use it as your own daily affirmation.
I know more today than I knew yesterday, and I can achieve my goals.